This is the 6th part of this manhwa. If you haven't seen the previous chapters, I recommend that you do. At that moment, we see Kwnon using a knife to attack Hangul, with him trying to defend himself as best as he could. Although his defense falls when Gwanghyuk hits him in the back with a metal bat. Sungho and Ju-aram also take out knives and try to cut off his head. But even though the gray-haired man manages to duck to dodge them, he still receives a couple of cuts on his face. The situation frustrates Hangul because things were complicated before, and now they had only become more difficult with weapons involved. Woo-sung tells him that it was thanks to him that Hee-gwang grew into quite a powerful organization. But that was the only reason, as he also gathered the best to accompany him. That's why his group was powerful even without him. Hangul, for the first time, is impressed that they created something like that solely for making money, and asks him when he planned his big plan and if it was the first time they met, or why he couldn't control himself after getting his revenge. With a smile, Woo-sung admits that he, genuinely and naively, had the sole purpose of revenge, but after learning how to fight and breaking his bully's teeth, he didn't feel satisfaction, anger, or relief, but sympathy. He liked feeling powerful, and that's why he did everything he could to keep experiencing that feeling. So, he sought out other fugitives that he could use as pawns to defeat others. That was a practice that gave him that feeling of power. However, on his path to greatness, there were people who stood in his way, Hangul and Tebium, who wanted to take care of the fugitives from the neighborhoods instead of using them, and that's why Tebium scolded him to stop doing it. A reprimand that made him feel like he was tied by a coward, and it made him experience genuine anger that led him to hire the mafia to take care of those obstacles. After that, he tried to deceive him at all costs to create Hee-gwang and build his own mafia. So, mockingly, he thanks Hangul, who is boiling with fury. Additionally, Woo-sung tells him that recently they were able to structure a recruitment system for fugitives in that church, and he will ensure that his organization continues to grow without limits. Undoubtedly, strong statements that make it clear to Hangul how dangerous Woo-sung and Hee-gwang were. The group continues their attack with bats on Hangul, who, even while defending himself, couldn't avoid the shoves that ended up leading him into the storage room and blocking the exit to lock him in, leaving him alone with the executives inside. Hangul assesses his situation and realizes that this time they were willing to finish him off. Before, he had been able to escape because Dajun was there, so now the option was almost impossible. He was in a predicament. Even so, when they ran towards him, he didn't hesitate to face them with a smile. He takes a nearby trash can and throws it at Kwnon, quickly taking advantage of it to take away his knife and cut off his ear. Upon this, Gwanghyuk responds by hitting him in the back with his bat, and Sungho and Aram take advantage of the moment to cut him together with their knives. Hangul does the same, moving gracefully among them and managing to produce deep cuts in each one. Woo-sung watches the scene, surprised that Cho Hangul can still perform such a display of skill even when he's at his limit. The gray-haired man realizes his expression, so he challenges him by asking if he was afraid, as his recruits didn't seem as strong as he boasted, to which the mobster mocks him for showing bravery when it was obvious he was at his limit. But the head of the Hangul family doesn't back down and suggests that maybe he sent his lackeys to fight him because, deep down, he was afraid that he was still inferior to him in power. This touches a sensitive nerve in Woo-sung, so he decides to accept his challenge, and he orders everyone to leave them alone. Hangul takes out a cigarette and comments that things should have always been this way because they were the only ones who could put an end to his story. To which Woo-sung scoffs, saying that kicking him out of Hee-gwang wasn't even as big of a regret as he might think. But when he threatened him, Hangul tells him that he could kill him or not, because he had no interest in his own life that day. This confuses Woo-sung, until he sees Hangul throw the cigarette butt towards the gasoline that had spilled earlier, igniting the room. At that moment, Hee-gwang's thugs curse him and realize that when he stabbed the executives before, he spilled that gasoline on purpose, planning to end it like this with their leader. Hangul admits that he doesn't like playing with fire, but if all of this started with it, referring to how he killed Tebium, then this was how it should end. He then takes his knife and orders his former friend to do the same, promising that that day he would finish him and his organization. Of course, all Hee-gwang members become agitated by this and try to rescue their leader from the flames while urging the executives to get away from the fire. One of them goes in search of a fire extinguisher, fearing that maybe their base would be consumed by the flames, when he is stopped by Woo-chang, who didn't want the fire to be put out. 5 years ago, we see Hangul eating with Wusung peacefully, talking about how Wusung had adapted to life in the Higuang store, with Hangul confessing that he was happy to finally have someone his age to talk to and feared that maybe he would leave. However, Wusung thanks him for saving him and helping him so much. Hangul forces him to repeat his gratitude several times in order to irritate him. At that moment, the dark-haired man asks Hangul if he could train him, as he wanted to be as strong as him to be able to seek revenge on those who had harmed him. The request initially surprises Hangul, but he ends up accepting it because they were friends. Now, those who were once friends were lined up in a row of flames, ready to fight to the death. The mobsters realize that the fire is spreading quickly, so their leader would have to defeat Hangul quickly to get out of there. Something that shouldn't be a problem considering how injured his opponents were and the feats their boss had achieved against the previous mafia. Wusung, annoyed, insults him for his actions, commenting that he noticed he tried to provoke him by accusing him of having an inferiority complex before, when they both knew that currently, even if he taught him to fight, he was much stronger than him. Hangul admits that he doesn't know if it was true or not, but he would find out if they fought as they did in the past, classifying this fight as their final showdown to see how much he had grown. Both of them take their positions with their knives, just like they used to fight with their fists in the past. They both look at each other, the past and present merging, and it shows the clash between them, as in their memories. They used to train in a friendly manner, with Hangul having a clear advantage, but in the present, they fight with clear murderous intentions, making it difficult to determine a possible winner. Hangul manages to inflict a cut on Wusung's arm, at the same time that he does the same on his forearm. In the flashback, it is seen how Wusung managed to kick him in the head, just as it happened now, and by landing this kick, he made Hangul release his weapon, giving him the opportunity to go after him with his own weapon. But the same move from the flashback repeats in the present. Hangul throws himself at his opponent to tackle him, causing him to drop his weapon as well, and then proceeds to strike them in the face. Wusung pushes him away with a kick. They both look at the knife in the middle of the field and jump towards it, before seeing who took it. In the memories of this first battle, Hangul managed to win after a side blow but told his friend that he had grown a lot, and although he was still far from matching him in power, he had a natural talent for fighting. Wusung thanks him, which causes Hangul to mock him, saying it wasn't necessary since they were friends. They both clench their fists in a friendly manner, and in the present, the same clash occurs as they both hold the knife, with Hangul holding the blade. Looking at the whole picture, it is seen that Wusung had stabbed Hangul in the chest while Hangul held his face and told him that he had grown a lot, becoming very strong. This doesn't matter to Wusung, who just yells at him to die. Hangul spits out blood and asks if he was so blind that he couldn't see the path he had taken, although he mentally questioned whether he had created that monster himself. To both questions, the gray-haired man comes to the conclusion that he must stop him to prevent him from harming innocents, so he grabs his face and throws him into the fire. Memories of all the times he directly faced Hegwang and his men cross his mind, and to his previous statement, he adds that he must also stop him because they were friends. Before entering the church, Cho Hangul walked through the alley where he rescued Wusung, which reminded him of how he met Dajung in the same circumstances. Determined, he entered the building, and the church began to burn in flames, causing all of Higuang's mobsters to flee in terror as they called the firefighters, while Wu Cheng watched the scene with a smile. Inside, Hangul did his best to keep Wusung's head in the flames, until he managed to free himself by kicking him away. When he pulls his face out, it can be seen that half of his face is burned. With hatred, both of them vow to kill each other, although Hangul hesitates when he sees that the wound in his chest is much deeper than he wanted, to the point that everything started to blur, but he needed to be sure that he would finish him. However, Wusung had more energy, so he jumps towards him to kill him. A memory comes to mind. He was in bed next to Wusung, and he asked if he had a family, to which the dark-haired man, hesitating, denied. A response that made Hangul laugh, as everyone there went through the same situation. The dark-haired man replied, with obviousness, that this was the reason they were all together in the first place. But he added that now he was better, and that was because he now had a family, referring to Tibium and the others. Despite being weak, Hangul manages to dodge every stab Wusung throws at him with his knife. Then, he steps on his foot and manages to grab another knife to counter his attacks, leading to a new exchange that results in one of the weapons cracking. Hangul's knife. Both of them keep their weapons clashing, and the gray-haired man was losing the strength competition, so he breaks this clash and punches Wusung in the face. This leads to a flurry of kicks, all of which are completely dodged by Wusung, until he takes advantage of a moment to stab Hangul in the side, hoping to kill him. But even wounded, the gray-haired man remains determined and gives him a strong headbutt that knocks him to the ground, although he doesn't manage to land any more blows, as Woo-sung tightens the knife and kicks him away. As he gets up, Woo-sung declares that he finds him deeply disgusting because a person who pretended to be good and took in random fugitives would never amount to anything. That's why he would ensure that his whole group had a slow and painful death. This brings new memories to the gray-haired man, where he blames himself for not being able to stop his friend when he killed the Ajusi, or when he created Higuang, thinking about how he cried that day when he realized that his best friend wasn't someone who could be family material. Both of them rush toward another collision between them, in which Hangul assures himself that this time he will sever all the bonds that connected them. However, this new clash is not seen because the light from the flames envelops both of their bodies. On the other hand, in a hospital, the girls who were kidnapped by Higuang were together, although one of them was in bed. In any case, when this task was over, Dajung was running back to the church after notifying the rest of the runaway family of the situation by message, hoping that Hangul would be waiting for him so they could all help him together, although the memory of their farewell never left his mind. Upon arrival, he looks in horror as the church is engulfed in flames and, without hesitation, runs towards it in search of his beloved leader. The protagonist ran through the fire, calling Hangul's name, although falling debris in the fire made it difficult for him to move easily. Remembering his past, he admits that when he ran away from home, he could only think of revenge, but then he was able to forget about it thanks to Cho Hangul, who allowed him to experience, for the first time in his life, the warmth of a family, which generated a debt to him that he wanted to start fulfilling. Until now, he felt that he still had a lot to repay, so he begged for him to be safe. Outside, the rest of the Hangul family had arrived and was doing their best to enter, but now the firefighters were preventing them from doing so at all costs due to the danger. Another one of them continued to use the hose to extinguish the fire, but was concerned about the direction of the wind, which made the task difficult and took away hope that the boy who had entered, Dajung, and any other survivors inside were still alive. However, when he looked up at the sky, he was relieved to see that it was starting to rain, extinguishing the fire. Inside, Dajung realized the same thing, making it much easier for him to move through the church. The smoke was affecting him, but he kept shouting his leader's name until he turned into a room and was shocked by what he found: Cho Hangul's lifeless body. He approaches him and doesn't hesitate to speak, asking why he's asleep and bleeding. Not wanting to think of the worst possibility, he carries him on his back to take him to a hospital to treat his wounds. As he walked, the protagonist confesses that he no longer needed to seek revenge, that he no longer cared about it, so he no longer had to leave them. "Where am I? I'm sure I was with Shin Woo-sung," were the first thoughts that Hangul had upon waking up. When he opens his eyes, he notices that he's in an ambulance being attended to, and in front of him is his entire family, crying their hearts out. But this doesn't matter to Hangul, as he feels happy to see their faces again. Starting with the one who reminded him of himself, Sungbin, with whom he resonated with everything he experienced after running away and losing his family, making it impossible for him to leave him. A decision he deeply rejoices in seeing how bright he had become. Then there was the one who became so reliable, Teak, whom he met when he was very weak and could die from anything, but who had a determination that helped him start caring about the well-being of the Hangul family. There was also the most mature of all of them, Gaeun. She had experienced a difficult life from a very young age that forced her to mature quickly, giving her a look of someone carrying the weight of the world, as well as a smile that warmed his heart. There was the one who used to cause trouble, Diob. There were times when he wanted to slap him for all the trouble he caused, but he could never do it. He never came to hate him, because his ability to be blatantly stupid was amusing, although it was even more fun to see how seriously he enjoys life now. It was a shame that he couldn't spend more time with him. Finally, there was the one he always worried about, Dajung. He wanted to help him complete his revenge, but he believed he couldn't do it anymore. He didn't think he could keep taking care of him for much longer. He wanted to avoid at all costs that he would walk the same path as Shin Woo-sung. And in the end, he may have succeeded because the boy who came was very different from his old friend. Dajung was a good guy. For all of that, he thanks him, remembering all the beautiful moments they lived, thanking him for becoming his family, because that's why he never felt alone. With those words, Cho Hangul closes his eyes forever, thinking that in his life, they were 5 bright stars, and if he were to be reborn, he would like them to be a family again. At that moment, he lets go of the paper he had in his hand, which was the photo of the 5 boys. A couple of months before the terrifying gas incident, Dajung and Hangul were on the rooftop of the house. Hangul teased him to call him Hyum, but the boy couldn't do it because it felt strange to address him like that after calling him formally for so long. This made the gray-haired man laugh, and he told him that he would have to do it because from now on, he would be his hyung from the streets, a term that refers to those who are like brothers in a family. After seeing the sincerity of his words, the protagonist finally managed to call him Hangul Hyung without any issues. The fight that night ended with Cho Hangul's death. His family members, Neon and her father, and Inhuan attended his funeral. Everyone mourned his death, and Dajung felt as if he had lost everything in the world with his passing. Higuang suffered a severe blow when their church burned down, making everything become quite silent. Thanks to Cho Hangul's sacrifice, the streets had found peace, even if the threat of the mafia organization still loomed over his family. That wasn't what he wanted. One night, Teek arrived and asked where Dajung was, to which Diob said, with disappointment, that he had probably gone out again. On the street, a thug begged him to let him go since he was no longer part of Higuang. But this didn't stop his attacker, Im Dajung, who continued to beat him severely. In his mind, the protagonist cursed his Hyung for not listening to him and letting him help. He was sure things would have been different if he had been with him. While crying, he swore that he would kill all the bastards involved in Cho Hangul's death. When he was about to land another blow, an axe stopped his arm. It was held by Wu Qing, who told him that he could help him if he wanted to finish off Higuang. However, of course, the protagonist just looked at him with absolute hatred. At dawn, in a warehouse, a man began to scream. It was Wusung who was still alive and screaming in pain from his injuries to his face. Sungho was with him and tried to calm him down as he was recovering from treatment for his burns. The man didn't care about this, he just wanted to know what happened to Higuang. Yunhak explained that their church had burned down, all the members had suffered serious injuries, and several of their affiliates had fled. So, their forces had weakened exponentially, and it would take them some time to regain the power and presence they had once. Wusung began to curse Cho Hangul for causing that, and Yunhak took the opportunity to tell him that now that Hangul was dead, there was no one who could get in their way. However, the criminal leader said that if there was, it was the Hangul family who could become an obstacle to Higuang in the future. That's why, as soon as the gang recovers, they will take care of eliminating them. Returning to Wu Cheng and the offer he made to the protagonist, he immediately pushes him away, recognizing him as one of those who were in the church that day during the execution of his Hyung, being well aware that he was one of the executives of the criminal group. That's why he has no doubt about attacking him, shouting that he will kill him, but the blonde man dodges all his attacks, asking him to calm down. With no results, he hits him in the stomach with the axe handle to make him take deep breaths and relax. While on the ground, Wu Cheng takes advantage of the moment to explain that he also wanted Higuang to disappear, so he hoped he wouldn't see him as a member of the organization. In fact, he admits that he hoped Cho Hangul would take care of Higuang, but he failed, unfortunately. Dajung doesn't accept this and tells him to shut up. But Wu Cheng continues, asking if his family, them, wouldn't seek revenge for their leader's death. The blonde man admits that he saw them all fight, and they were quite an impressive group, but they weren't enough to defeat Higuang. They needed much greater strength to take down Shin Wusung, and he was a person who could be quite useful in achieving that goal. That's why he offers his hand to join forces, promising that if they followed his plan, they would achieve their objective. At the end of his monologue, what Dajung does is spit on the blonde man's hand, declaring that he had no intentions of working with trash like him. Wu Cheng says that Cho Hangul's death was probably a huge shock, so he leaves his number and goes away, assuring that one day he will be in trouble and will need his help. At that moment, he can call him without any problem. In another moment, Dajung was on the rooftop of the house, looking into the distance when he takes out a cigarette from a box he found among Hangul's things. Presumably to remember him, he decides to light it and smoke it, but he starts coughing heavily, wondering why his Hyung used to smoke something like that. This comical moment is easily ruined when he looks in front of him and doesn't find him there. He couldn't stay there any longer because it held too many memories of him. Precisely, remembering all the moments he lived with him, he starts crying inconsolably. Then, he takes out the piece of the photo with Hangul's face and looks at it with teary eyes. Night falls, it's a rainy day, and Dajung is in front of the door, about to leave. He turns and looks at Diob, lying on his back, and assumes he's asleep. But when he's about to leave, he hears him speak, asking where he's going, warning him that he'll catch a cold in that rain. Dajung tells him that he needs to go somewhere and it will take some time. The redhead offers to accompany him, but the protagonist declines his request as he wanted to be alone. Diob accepts this, saying that he'll probably be fine now that he has experienced part of what it's like to live as a fugitive. Dajung reassures him and promises to return soon, and by the look on Diob's face, it's clear that he understands his plan to run away. However, he doesn't say anything more than to stay safe. Once the door is closed, the redhead begins to cry over his departure. Dajun walks through the rain, feeling depressed. In his mind, he talks about how it seemed like a dream to have met Cho Hangul, to know the fugitive family, the greatest joy of his life. He thinks that maybe that's why God took away his newfound happiness. At that very moment, Neon receives a message from him, where he resigns from his job, something that greatly worries her and Inhuan, who was with her. Dajun felt as if God were telling him to do what he had forgotten he wanted to do. That's why he understands it now. He wanted to tell God that he would do what he had to do. At that moment, he approaches a group of gangsters who were beating up a young boy, and they were part of Hegwang, threatening the young boy to join them or die. When the trio notices the protagonist's presence, they ask him what he's doing there. He approaches them slowly, knowing that he had to handle things on his own to prevent the trash from getting back into his life, to ensure the safety of himself and his loved ones. Without fear, he takes a brick and, hoping to punish them, he smashes each of the thugs' faces with it. After defeating them, the injured young man thanks him, but Dajun asks him if he was really going to join Hegwang, something the young boy immediately denies, and with that said, Dajun leaves without saying another word. However, the young man asks him if, instead of Hegwang, he could join him, making it clear that he wasn't weak and that they only defeated him because they caught him off guard among 5 people, so he could be useful to him. The memory of Nam Wucheng and how they couldn't defeat them alone comes to his mind. The power wielded by each executive returns to his head. So, he simply tells him that he can do whatever he wants, something the young boy takes as a positive response. He would become strong enough not to lose again, stronger than anyone else, and strong enough to punish those who had harmed him before as well. Those were Dajun's thoughts. He wanted everyone to get a taste of their own medicine, to not die in these lands and to rule the streets. He would kill them all. A year ago, before Dajun joined the Hangul family, Cha Diop had just run away from home and was living in a neighborhood known for its delinquency. A 16-year-old Diop, on the 30th day since he ran away, had just defeated a thug and taunted him before leaving. Although others tried to pick a fight, they stopped when they knew he was the best fighter in the neighborhood. But an older man reproached him for his actions, accusing him of reporting him for what he did. However, the redhead dismissed it, saying that fugitives didn't have to follow anyone's rules. This annoyed the people present, who claimed that all fugitives were trash like him. That afternoon, Diop was eating when a little dog approached him. The redhead pushed it away, saying he wouldn't give it anything, but when it licked his hand, he couldn't help but smile. He got up and left, telling the dog that it should leave because a fugitive like him couldn't give it a future. At that moment, the young man he had defeated earlier returned with a group, all armed. They were too many, and Diop knew it, so he decided to leave as if he could easily handle them, under the pretext that he didn't feel like fighting, hoping it would be enough. However, as a way to convince him, the group grabbed the dog by the neck and told him they would beat it to death if he left. Diop said indifferently that it wasn't his problem what they did with it and continued on his way. This seemed to convince them, but they decided to take it out on the dog, so they threw it like a baseball to hit it with a bat. Fortunately, the blow didn't connect, thanks to a jump Diop made to shield it. This surprised the group, who couldn't understand how someone like him could care about animals. To which the redhead responded that he couldn't stand it when people messed with cute things. After this, he managed to give them a beating that scared them away, although he admitted that he almost died in the fight. At least he was happy that the dog was safe and started petting it while eating his piece of cake, which he had thrown during the fight. Having said that, he decides to get up and leave, telling it that he could never afford to give it the luxuries it needed, so all he could do was say goodbye, hoping it would find a home. At that very moment, a little girl saw the dog and instantly fell in love with it, so she asked her father to take it home. Diop admits that he also hoped to find someone who would adopt him one day. As he exits the park, Cho Hangul is lying on the ground with a magazine on his face. He removes it slightly and comments that the guy was funny. Without a doubt, these words would mark the beginning of the redhead's new life. The year before Dajung joined the Hangul family, Geung was on her 7th day of living on the streets, wondering what to do with her life now that she had run away at the age of 16. At that moment, she was crying, and a boy approached her and promised to help her, introducing himself as Jihyun. Afterward, we see both young people in a cafe. After Geung told him her story, Jihyun revealed that he had also run away from home and now belonged to a family of fugitives. Commenting that it would be better to stay together to support each other, he asked if she wanted to join his fugitive family, where he would make sure to provide her with a place to stay, work, and sleep, in addition to introducing her to the rest of the people in the family. To top it off, he told her that he believed she would fit in because he felt she could get along with everyone. This conversation is enough for Geung to timidly accept. But her surprise is quite significant when they arrive at a bar full of muscular guys and adults. One of the men comments on his surprise that he managed to catch a new girl, thinking that maybe it was because he was a young boy, and he tells her that he will deposit the introduction fee later. Gaeung is taken aback by the situation, showing her discomfort, which irritates Jihyun quite a bit. Unlike when he introduced himself, he has no qualms about getting aggressive now. He grabs her hand and yells at her to shut up and do it. This brings tears to Gaeung's eyes, but not from the pain, it's because she believed his lies. She easily manages to perform a move to get Jihyun off of her and toss him into the air. Then, she starts running away from the place, wondering how her life turned into a nightmare. She was chased by the men from the bar who declared that she would only have to serve drinks, but she ignored them. As they pursued her, a silhouette attacked them, declaring that they couldn't ignore such disgusting people. Rain begins to fall again in the city, and Gaeung returns to the same spot as before, repeating the scene, now crying because she believed she could rely on someone else. A bitter situation that leads her to the conclusion that she couldn't trust anyone. At that moment, the rain is stopped by someone, Cho Hangul, who says she'll catch a cold. Obviously, after what she went through, the girl rejects him, but Hangul tells her to just take the umbrella and gives her a card, which corresponds to a billiard room where she could ask for a job. Finally, he recommends being careful on the streets because there are many horrible people out there, like the ones who were following her earlier, and he says goodbye. In shock from the rapid turn of events, Gaeung yells at him that she didn't need his help, but Hangul just smiles, saying that he only helped her for free this time. Gaeung starts to walk, thinking that even though he was a kind person, he could still be like Jihyun. However, on her way, she encounters the men who were chasing her before, all lying on the ground, and she realizes that the guy was responsible. So, she starts running back to where he was. She understands that it might be foolish, but she wanted to believe that she could trust someone else. So when she returns, she talks to Cho Hangul to ask him where he stays, surprising the gray-haired man. He was the person she believed she could trust. In the past, Kim Taek trained every day. According to him, there was a reason why he wanted to become strong. A year before he joined the Hangul family, he used to live on the streets, totally alone, getting beaten up daily by the same gang that took advantage of him being quite weak. A routine that he was sure would eventually kill him, which was why he needed to become stronger. One of those days, 16-year-old Jeon Neon found him and took him to her pizzeria, where they fed him while he mentioned that he hadn't eaten for days. Unlike other people, Neon and her father felt sorry for his situation and, trying to help him, they offered him the chance to come and eat at their place whenever he wanted, regretting that they couldn't do much more. Although this was enough to make Taek cry, grateful, all he could do was praise the taste of their food, calling it the best he had ever tasted in his life, and he promised that he would repay them someday. It was thanks to their help that Taek survived, although the harassment he received threatened his survival until one day he genuinely thought they would kill him because his body was starting to go numb from the pain. While this was happening, one thought dominated his mind. Nothing would happen to him if he were bigger and stronger. Suddenly, he stopped feeling those attacks, and when he looked, there was a person, Cho Hangul, standing over the unconscious bodies of his harassers. Although the gray-haired man ignored it, attributing all his actions to them being too noisy, Taek took the opportunity to ask him to train him. He could see that Hangul saw him as a weakling, but he still accepted to train him. So, his routine changed, and now he trained with Cho Hangul every day. Although it was difficult, he made an effort to complete every exercise because he never wanted to be on the brink of death again. Finally, he managed to gain the strength and muscles that characterized him so much, and no one dared to mess with him again, as he could even defeat all his bullies. He no longer had to worry about his survival being at risk. Cho Hangul himself acknowledged his power and told him that he could stop training and take care of himself. Taek wanted to continue training, but without Hangul, he found the process boring. He had already achieved his dream of having the strength to take care of himself, so there was no longer such a need. So, he simply decided to explore the city that day. He quickly realized that his training would never be enough when he found a group of mobsters destroying Neon, and her father's pizzeria for not paying the requested fee. There were many of them, and the long-haired man knew it, but he still didn't hold back from kicking one of them and shouting that he would kill them if they continued to dirty their hands in that place. Everyone, even the owner of the establishment, knew it was madness to confront him, and in the end, Taek ended up on the ground, in pain, being supported by Neon and her father. Despite this, the purple-haired guy smiled, understanding that he needed to keep training, with them being the reason to become stronger. So, he asked the owner not to close his pizzeria, as he wouldn't allow them to be harmed again, as that was his favorite place in the whole world. That's why he wouldn't stop training and getting stronger every day until he could protect the people who helped him. Approximately a year before Im Dajung joined the Hangul family, Ha Sungbin was on the brink of death lying on the ground when Cho Hangul found him to offer support to get out of his lonely and dark life. However, this wasn't so easy. Despair still lingered. There was a moment when both of them had gone days without eating, and they argued about it, with Hangul making stupid suggestions like stealing food from a cat or eating a duck from the lake. Fed up, Sungbin decided to get up and find a way to make money so they wouldn't starve to death, literally. Despite his good intentions, getting a part-time job wasn't easy for a fugitive like him, especially someone who had inflicted harm on himself like he did, and who had quite evident scars on his arms. This became more than evident when one person agreed to let him work at a store until they saw the scars on his arms and rejected him. People were reluctant to even approach him because they thought he had a mental problem, going so far as to be kicked out of the store because of it. For all the trouble he had caused, he felt great helplessness for what he had done to his arm and regretted it. Just before leaving, a man approached him and asked if he wanted to cover his arm. So, he took him to a tattoo parlor, saying that it was difficult to erase a tattoo once it was done but that it was a good option to avoid people's stares. Despite his warnings, Sungbin accepted his help, although he was nervous. Afterward, the man started tattooing his arm, entirely for free, highlighting his inability to feel pain. A few days later, Sungbin had his arm completely covered, and he thanked the man, saying that he liked it very much. Although curious, he asked him why he went through so much trouble for him. To which the man replied that he could relate to his situation, being a fugitive who found a home in his passion for tattoos. With those words, he gave him a smile, saying that even in the darkest moments, one could find a light at the end of the tunnel. Sungbin thanked him and left while the man told him he could come back if he ever got bored. Upon hearing this, he took the opportunity to ask if he could teach him how to tattoo. A year later, Sungbin returned home with Hangul, excited because his salary had arrived, and they would eat grilled chicken. Although what surprised Hangul the most about his statement was that he was already good enough to do tattoos. Sungbin thought that the tattoo artist was right since he had learned to live a life where he was constantly running from everyone. He had been lucky to meet so many good people. His first job was the tattoos on Teek and Diob, so he thanked them for trusting him. However, they downplayed it, genuinely pleased with his work, something that made Sungbin smile, asking if he would really become a good tattoo artist in the future. A smile that also came because the purple-haired man felt that he had finally found that light he needed to continue. Meanwhile, the tattoo artist, now Sungbin's boss, was attending to a customer. It was Wu Cheng who asked, out of curiosity, who those guys calling themselves the Hangul family were. And that's how the 6th part of this manhwa ends. If you have reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you have been one of the few people to make it here. So comment the word revenge in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.